All right, I think we should just go ahead and get started. So everyone, I'm Jordan. This is my mom, Edith Cooper. Really, really thrilled to have all of you chime in and join for this really important conversation. To start, just wanted you, Mom, to kick it off and share your story and share a few thoughts that are top of mind. And then we're going to move it to questions. People can type in the comments and ask us any questions. We really do want to hear what's on people's minds and how we can really hopefully make this helpful for everybody.
Terrific. So, it's kind of unusual for me not to have something to say. For all of you who I've gotten to know, and for all of you that I want to know in this conversation and beyond, it's tough for me to get choked up, but I'm really choked up right now. And it is because that this has been an extraordinarily difficult period across so many dimensions. First, around the world, we're all hit with the pandemic. COVID-19 has hit us all, but of course, unfortunately, it disproportionately impacted people of color in America. Studies say that almost 3 times as much than the white population, and that hurts me, and that hurts society. But it's something that if we had thought about and prepared for, we may have been in a better position to deal with it. We are also in an extraordinary period of time where we are again, and I stress again, racked as in a society in America by police brutality and racial violence. It reminds me of the fact that, again, it's something that if we had paid attention to the patterns that have existed in our society for so long, we could have, and I would say should have, taken more deliberate steps to avoid it. But I'm really moved right now because as I watch the stream of people who are joining in this conversation, I'm inspired. It gets me out of a feeling of deep sadness and grief for a moment to be fueled by energy towards action. The feelings are still there, but the priority of taking steps for change are overwhelming for me. Let me start out quickly just telling a bit about my story, because it's in sharing our stories that we gain perspectives, and I hope to do so by the questions and comments that you add. I'm a child of a family of 5. My parents are both from the South. I was born in 1961. I'm not ashamed. I'm old, and it's important because I was born into a society of racial segregation, legalized racial segregation in my lifetime. I recall going to my family's where we spent the summer, and hearing the experiences of don't go into this store or don't cross that street. But the things that I remember the most are the stories of resilience and courage that we all had as people of color to keep moving forward. And that has actually inspired me every minute of every day. I was raised, and I have raised my children with my husband and my family, some of whom are on today, to know that we had to be excellent at all times. Excellence, get it done, be great, not great, better in school, better in work ethic, better in everything, because that's what it would take. It would take being better. I found myself in work environments for years where I was the only one. And I hope and know that this will resonate with so many people on this call, not just those people on the call that are Black, but those people on the call who have noticed in their lifetime how their environments are void of people of color. I know for sure that I am who I am today because there were opportunities for me to gather with others, to hear from other people's perspectives. I heard Ken Frazier, one of the many CEOs who spoke out earlier this week, talk about his life experience, the experience of having an opportunity to have access to excellent education, as many people in the majority do, how it made a difference to him, how people who touched his life helped him move forward. Those are all experiences that I have. Those are all experiences that we've had to have, quite frankly, to move forward in our lives. And so here we are now, what to do. What to do with the anguish and the anguish. I am so excited, inspired by the outpouring from leaders. I've spent much of the days over the course of the last week in conversations with many leaders from across different disciplines, from healthcare to the tech world to broad industry, looking for insights with respect to what to say, what's the right thing to say. And I applaud it. I applaud it. I applaud that the Business Roundtable, that represents 15 million employees, has come out and said, we are against racial violence. We support and grieve for the family of Mr. Floyd and others. But this is just the beginning. We have to turn these conversations into action. I also applaud the energy and just the determination of the people who are out in protest, peaceful protest, to basically say, we are not going to tolerate that anymore. I'm inspired continuously by the generation of young people, and I could say that because I'm in the older demographic, who are not taking conversation as the beginning, the middle, and the end. I recall my days at Goldman Sachs during a previous crisis. Yes, it's true. You go back 4 years, we were having the same conversation. And when I talked to some of my colleagues, they were really struggling. The most senior people at the firm were struggling because they just couldn't figure out whether it was the position of a firm with a strong culture like Goldman Sachs to speak up and to speak out. But so many of you that I worked with then and have been inspired by since really highlighted the fact that it's not just about the experience of Black people that matters. It's the experience that we are all living as human beings. And that is every organization's responsibility. Every organization, but more importantly, every person's responsibility in organizations. So why don't I stop there? I appreciate again, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's on this conversation. And Jordan, if I could ask you to help moderate and highlight the questions that we should start to take on.
Absolutely. So a lot of people right now are really just sharing their support and expressing happiness to be participating in this. A point that you just brought up really resonates with me around how this isn't just trying to relate to other people for the purpose of that. It actually is a real superpower, and being able to understand and sit in other people's shoes is a skill that will lead to success in so many parts of your life. And it's also just the right thing to do. And so, I would love, Mom, if you could just start to share your thoughts on, you've had a lot of these conversations with various executives, with people who are CEOs of massive public companies who sit on some of these boards. And when a CEO or when a manager or when a 25-year-old comes to you, because I know you do talk to people really across the spectrum, what are some consistent themes that come up in the advice that you share for them and in the types of work that they can do on themselves, and how you work to hold them accountable for making changes?
Yeah. First of all, welcome Stuart Butterfield, CEO of Slack, on this call. I appreciate your thirst for learning. And to all of those from the Mahogany group at Slack, the Black Resource Group, which has been an incredible source of guidance, counsel, and advice, we thank you. First of all, the conversation often starts with, I don't know whether I'm going to say the right thing or the wrong thing. And I immediately, as soon as the opportunity presents itself, saying the only thing that's wrong is to say nothing. That is wrong. Race is a conversation that is difficult. Why? Because it is it is generated from the historical experience of this country, which was founded on slavery. Slavery is not an easy topic, and there has been significant progress in this country, but progress is not masking the fact that there are still serious issues and inequalities that we as people of color every day deal with. And so some of the conversations I'm having are really encouragement to get in it. I've been not surprised, because I have these feelings myself, around the anguish, the tears, the pain that that has resulted in leaders bringing people together to talk about that, to talk about race, to talk about the experience and the challenges. And I applaud everyone who has leveraged their position, their access, their opportunity to be a center of that conversation, because it is not hard. It is not easy. It is very hard. Embarrassment. One of my dear friends and a relationship said that he was really embarrassed because he worked with people of color in his organizations for years, and he thought he knew their experience. But what he really knew was their resume. What he really knew was their, professional impact. But he didn't really know the lens through which their experiences mattered and should have mattered to him. So those are just some examples. I do want to comment, though, and I promise I'll try to make these answers shorter, but I get energized around these things. What have I learned from 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, gosh, from my kids, my nieces and nephews, that being patient is not a course that we can be comfortable with. That we've got to really move from conversation to action, to joining the peaceful protests, to bringing up these conversations with their peers and colleagues that, quite frankly, are very, very difficult, for taking the risks that they feel in bringing their true Blackness to the workplace. And I'm proud of that, because that's what's really going to make change. That's what's really going to create conversation and difference.
In line with that, we have a great question from Casper. Casper, thank you for joining us. What were things that white colleagues have done in your career, if any moments have really jumped out at you, that really helped advocate for equity and Black lives for yourself and for other people that you're working with, sort of looking back at your time in the corporate world?
I'm going to try to make this as straightforward and as actionable as possible. Pay attention. White people need to pay attention to who they're interacting with, the judgments that they bring to bear in those interactions, and the things they can do to really make a difference. In my experience, a real changing point was when I first met Mahzreen Banaji. She's a professor at Harvard in the psychology department, and she's done an incredible amount of very thoughtful work on unconscious bias. And I recall being asked to help my colleagues in banking create a snippet on diversity, and those were the exact words. Because, and this was obviously several years ago, because companies are trying to work through it, they're trying to figure it out. And so we were given 15 minutes on the agenda, and it went back and forth. Here's the thing that made a difference to me. My boss at the time actually was Gary Cohn, intervened, and he used the weight that he had in the organization to basically say, are we real or are we not real? Who do we stand for as an organization? A 15-minute, half an hour slot turned into an hour and a half. And why? Because everybody there didn't want to leave. They wanted to understand how their experiences were influencing the bias that exists in the day-to-day. Other things that mattered to me as a Black person was having an opportunity to gather and to share, because it gave me and others an opportunity to really feel the force of excellence that was around us. And then finally, to conclude, what really made a difference is when the conversations turned to actions. When I had the opportunity with my wonderful colleagues in the HR organization at Goldman Sachs to really get granular and understand the experience of Black professionals in the organization, the significance that managers played on their experience, and we came up with specific actions to change the trajectory of people of color at the firm, i.e. we created the meritocracy that we all strived for. So conversation, empathy, but also owning the responsibility to take action and to create change.
Yeah. We've got another, there's a lot of questions around having conversations and best practice on how to approach conversations with people who are a different race to you. So whether that is, us as Black women having conversations with our white colleagues, or like vice versa, just being able to open up the conversation in a way that feels not safe, because this isn't really this isn't about everyone needing to feel okay. We actually shouldn't feel okay. But any suggestions that you have on that front around approaching these conversations and guidelines for those?
Yeah, the first interesting thing to highlight is that part of the reason these conversations are so difficult is because, unfortunately, often the case is that the conversations on any level are not being had with people of color, because of the fact that there is still the challenge of having Black people at all levels of organizations, the most senior levels specifically. And so therefore, I think the most important thing is to recognize and see the fact that your reality is not fully informed because of the narrow lens through which you are leading or acting or living your life. And so that's the first thing. Start paying attention in the beginning. The second thing is to create opportunities to have these conversations. And I would say that I am inspired by the commitment that Black people have to, and the willingness and the sense of responsibility to provide, the insights. It is awkward to walk up to someone that you haven't really developed a relationship with and say, hey, let's talk about race. But is it uncomfortable to go up to someone and say, hey, I'm troubled by what's going on in society. I am against, killing of people, human beings, Black men and Black women. It troubles me and I want to talk about it. Can we talk about it? Is that uncomfortable? I don't think that's, and honestly, I'll take that back because I don't want it to be dismissive. I started out by talking about how difficult our country's history is in these topics, but I implore you to have the courage to go forward and to ask those questions because it will certainly make a difference. Now, what happens? You're in these conversations. How do you handle them? It's important to speak and to be heard and to be measured. And sometimes, honestly, that's really difficult. But I want people to be able to say things that are a little bit off center. I want to project that I am listening and I'm using these as learning opportunities. But it is so wonderful when I see that people are doing the work on their own. There's so many resources out there that can enlighten all of us. I personally got online and I'm involved with the Smithsonian African American History Museum, and they've just released a portal on race. I spent much time on that portal. Why? Because there's so much that I can learn. Someone sent me a manifesto from 1942. A group of Black professionals in North Carolina came together to talk and to create a center of gravity around the Black experience for Black soldiers who were coming back from World War I, 1942. I wasn't aware. So I would really just also ask that we should all try to do the work to become more aware of why these historical experiences have relevance today.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much incredible literature out there, and podcasts and movies and media and content and resources that I just would encourage everyone to take advantage of it and spend their time seeking out. A couple questions have come up consistently from multiple people. One is around how do we make this change last, and how do we sustain this effort and the attention that the Black experience is getting right now into meaningful, long-lasting change? The question that Strat Dennis raised was around, a lot of companies are putting out statements about how Black Lives Matter and how they care. How can people working at some of these companies help ensure that changes are made over a long period of time, and actually think about how we can hold people accountable? The next question, which I'm just giving you a heads up around, is around what advice would you get both for a Black person who is in a company of primarily white people, who's trying to both take care of themselves as well as push the conversation forward and hold their company accountable? Additionally, how can white people really be allies without taking up the space that's needed by Black people? So let's talk first about longevity and how we can start to think in the long term, especially as it relates to corporate change.
Thanks for the question, Stratton. And I see questions and comments for many of my friends and former colleagues. Strat, you know that this is a journey, and it's one where you have to be relentless. If you want to be a company that is relevant today and going forward, you have to be relentlessly focused on creating a platform where excellence will prevail. If that access to opportunity is, for a variety of reasons, more limited to people of color, to Black people specifically, I'm at the point now where let's make this statement. If you don't have senior people who are Black in your organization, who are using their seat to influence what's going to be important in the organization from a customer perspective, from a positioning perspective, from a future perspective, you will as an organization lose ground. I believe that deeply. We need to ensure, by continuing to push these conversations, that every CEO, every leader that is putting out these incredibly thoughtful, thorough emails and communications with their employees own that responsibility as well. Because organizations and leaders generally are in a position to make that happen. But I'm also not suggesting that you have to wait till you get to that point to make a difference. Strat and others on this call, use your experience every single day to pull the next generation of Black people aside, to give them the insights that the majority are getting on a casual basis, to introduce them, to bring them into meetings, to help them take the risks, and to have the assertiveness that is I would say is harnessed or prevented because of all the concerns about the bias that exist. And so please, please, please keep doing that, because it really, really makes a difference. But to make sustainable change, we have a responsibility, all of us, in our day-to-day roles and responsibilities, to keep pushing this conversation forward. I'm looking at some of the people on this call. We've got people from industry. We have physicians on this call. We have thought leaders in the diversity space. We've got everything. If everybody on this call walked away with an added, reinforced commitment to making that difference, I'm telling you, we will keep change moving forward.
Yeah. And the next question, which was really around how can white people really be allies to Black people in the corporate context and beyond, while also giving them space to share their voices and to be heard?
Yeah, you know, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and. I think that when you are an ally to Black people, you are breaking down the barriers of communication, relationships, connectivity that are preventing our voices from being heard. I am so inspired and appreciative, but quite frankly, would have expected the reach out from many of my white friends and colleagues in support and in eagerness to get involved, as quite frankly they always have been. And so, you know, to white people, you know, again, I'd rather you be overly aggressive than to sit back and not say anything. And I would suspect that anybody who's taking the time to have this call would welcome an opportunity to be helpful, to help build the bridges if you're uncomfortable doing that. And we all are. Listen, you know, putting yourselves in conversations where you're not sure what someone would say and you're not sure of their perspective is not easy. It's not easy for anybody, but we can do it. I know we can do it. We have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. We absolutely do. We are, and someone wrote a comment that has been circulating that I think is very prescient that I'm going to turn into a question. Make the hire, write the check. I mean, those are two things that if you have access to capital and you're deploying capital, you can actually do. You can invest in Black people and people of color. You can hire more Black people and work with them. What are your thoughts on ways to actively hire more Black people, as well as create situations where they're set up to succeed and thrive?
Yeah, so speaking of make the hire, I see on here that Richard Whitten has joined. Richard Whitten is responsible for me joining Goldman Sachs. Wow. And it's probably almost 25 years ago. And he was not just responsible for convincing me that this would be a positive move for me and for my family, but his responsibility for hiring didn't end when I walked through the door. He took responsibility for staying close to my work, to giving me access to, you know, thought leaders and decision makings at the firm. And he made a difference, particularly in those early days when, you know, it could go terribly well or not so well. And we all know that we are under the spotlight as Black people when we are new in organizations. And so that's an important message. You know, hiring is the beginning, and hiring, particularly when in so many organizations there's so much to do, is table stakes. I get frustrated when I get involved in conversations. Again, I'm happy to have them. And, you know, I encourage the openness. Well, you know, Edith, it's really hard. You know, we got to find, like, we like strive for excellence. And so, you know, and this is a meritocracy. Seriously, you know, let's go. Let's step up the game. Let's assume that there's excellence and let's figure out how to go and get it. And don't stop when you make the hire. This work can be done. You know, we did it. We know how long it takes to get from one position to the next position going forward. Be deliberate about it. Get involved. Be intentional. So I talked about the hire, write the check. I do think that we need to have a serious conversation and action related to the flow of capital and the access to starting enterprises and businesses that are going to be important for changing the world, and the experience and the prototype of what it means to be a founder. I've been living in a somewhat of a crazy time. You know, I grew up in large organizations. I benefited so greatly from the ideas, the courage, the access that I've had For the last year, I've been working with Jordan on a startup that's really creating, a center of gravity for these conversations. And let me tell you something, like, despite the credentials, despite the currency that I may have built up in terms of relationships, et cetera, it is no joke being a person of color, a woman of color, going out there, talking to people about committing their capital. And it's a little disappointing when after you go through, et cetera, the response you get is it an app? And I'm like, but like, can we talk about who we are and what our credentials are? And if that's our experience, what is the experience of so much genius out there that, quite frankly, does not have the opportunity to learn from, to get access, to get the support that every single person needs to be successful. So when I see the emails go out, I'm really pushing for, okay, then therefore what?
Yeah. I mean, we could spend hours talking about the challenges in the VC tech and startup space. I am not trying to steal Edith's thunder at all, but we've been building this business together, and we went out to fundraise last fall. People who were close to us were like, "Oh, it's gonna be fine." People were raising seed rounds at like $2 million, $3 million. They're like, "Oh, that's nothing. It's gonna be fine. You two are amazing. People will get it." And I mean, both my mom and I have thrived in various white spaces throughout our lives, and I have never felt like less seen as a person, as someone who has achieved a lot of various things in different spaces. People just fundamentally didn't believe that we were going to build something big and build something great, and it was really saddening. And I just think, if you are an investor and you're on this, if you know investors, like, people really need to check what they think it means when, oh, that pitch was really good. That person's really confident. Like, they're going to knock it out of the park. They're like going to achieve something big.
So
when actually it's a lot of biases that go into making that assessment versus, opportunity.
And can we just please, and then we're going to transition back to, the fact that, but can we just please pay attention? There was an article in the publication around the best pitches I've ever heard. I think it was, it doesn't matter. And they highlighted 10 products and pitches.
All white men.
All of the people highlighted were men. All of them. There was not one Black or Latino person on that list. Seriously? Pay attention. Pay attention. I'm hoping, and I know, because there's a lot of people out there who know where value is, are looking at that and saying, oh, this is going to be good for me. Because I know that they've left a whole crew of people out there who they are not listening to, and I am going to find those people, and I'm going to give them access. I'm going to give them ideas. I'm going to give them help, and I'm going to give them money, because people are not paying attention to that excellence. But let's, for a minute, and I think that that we also have to appreciate that we are all on this call privileged in one way or the other. Okay, yes. We all are of a certain education. We all have opportunities, and I feel this way. Let me speak personally. I have opportunities to want to have a conversation, and I can find many people to engage with. I have access to healthcare. Let me share something personal with you. Several years ago, I wasn't feeling great. I went to the doctor. She's like, wow, your blood pressure is really high, but I'm sure it's white coat syndrome. I'm sure you're going to be okay. Go home, get some rest. You're working way too hard. That Goldman Sachs is a really stressful place. Calm down your life. Went back the next day, it was just as high. And there was a doctor who said, you know what? You need to have further testing. Turns out I have basically every comorbidity that is killing people in the Black community. I have high blood pressure. I'm pre-diabetic. There's a family history. I have access to healthcare. I have a doctor who looked beyond the skin color and said, we need to dig further. How many people of color use the emergency room walk in, are dismissed because they're stressed and they're working too hard, who die of strokes, who have heart attacks. And so as we are here thinking about how we're going to break through the different barriers, because through that we're going to create change, I would implore everyone to really use your resources to get smart and to be supportive about creating these equalities for people who, quite frankly, are the essential workers who have been going to work every single day during this pandemic. And know that in our fortune is a responsibility to commit to not just changing the environment in corporate America, but also changing the environment more broadly.
100%. So we have a lot of questions, but not a ton of time left, and so I'm just scrolling through to see if we can get a couple more in. You know, I'm going to shift gears slightly, and would just love if we could leave everyone with a couple actions that they could take, and maybe ask people to start sharing some of the actions that they've already taken and things that they can do going forward. We've talked a lot about this so far. You know, people can have the difficult conversations with people in their company. White allies both need to speak up as well as listen, and do both of those at the same time. Companies need to look at their hiring practices and their talent development practices and really commit and understand the data. But, you know, Mom, do you have any other just actions that we can think about? I mean, I would love to just hear your point of view so we can leave people with
Sure.
things
that and also I would encourage everyone to post organizations that you are supportive of, and encourage others to pay attention. In fact, we will circulate those as a follow-up on LinkedIn for those that are interested. So organizations that have made a difference to me, that I'd like to highlight: NAACP, LDF, Sherilyn Eiffel. Get to know that organization. Get to know the hard work that they're doing in terms of legislation that is impacting access to voting rights. Hugely, hugely important. Voting at the local level, the government, national level. So NAACP, LDF, the Innocence Project, I see that here. Really, really important work. The African American History Museum. And why? You might say a cultural institution in this time. Please know that cultural institutions are centers of gravity for thought leadership that will really make a difference. And that museum highlights the fact that the Black experience is America's experience. I would go there and I would learn more. Mount Sinai has an initiative on health care inequalities. I would ask you to look into it and to look into medical organizations around you that are really making a difference. There are other organizations on bail reform. There's no lack of organizations. And thank you for posting. And I would just conclude by saying that I guess what I said in the beginning, which is I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to have a community that's growing every day that is a resource for me and for so many. For those of you who are in organizations, who are in these conversations, I'm grateful to you because it's not easy. Because here's the thing, businesses are going on, you know, commerce continues. And we are a part of that, but we also bear the responsibility. Get yourself in conversations with people that you typically are not in conversations with. Pay attention, be intentional. And I'm getting the nod. Thank you, everybody.
I'm only getting the nod because someone did ask how is Medley contributing to this and where does that come in? We didn't talk a lot about our business. We didn't feel like this was the right forum, but if you're interested in learning more, you can go to our website. It's withmedley.com, and we're going to be launching in just a couple of weeks. It's really all about creating spaces like this, and we're building a high quality and high commitment network for people that's really united around personal and professional growth. So professional networks of the past, limited to elites, mostly rich white men. We're trying to make a network where people of all ethnicities, geographies, gender can come together and share in growth together. So
yeah,
yeah.
You all have really inspired so many people on this call, and I see your names and when I think, am I doing enough? I think of all of you, and my answer is no, I'm not. And so I appreciate you all encouraging and insisting that leaders of today are leading with purpose, intent to make a difference to people all over the world. And I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.